As the meal went on, the atmosphere grew increasingly rowdy. The slaughterers forgot about their guest, and the air, already warmed by the blazing fire, became warmer still, with laughter and joking, with the telling of tales and sudden bursts of song. And when Gristle himself appeared, apparently none of the worse for his ordeal, everyone went mad. They cheered, they clapped, they whooped and whistled, their crimson faces aglow in the bright firelight. 3 men jumped up and hoisted Gristle onto their shoulders, and while they paraded him round and round, the rest of the slaughterers beat their mugs on the table and sang a simple song in their deep and syrupy voices. "Welcome back, lost slaughterer. Welcome like a stranger. Welcome back from the deep, deep woods. Welcome back from danger." Over and over they repeated the verse. Not all together, but as a round with each table of slaughterers waiting their turn to start singing. The air was filled with swirling harmonies, more beautiful than Twig had ever heard. Unable to resist, he joined in. He banged the table to be with his own mug, and was soon singing the words with the rest. After the third circuit of the tables, the men approached Twig himself. They stopped directly behind him and placed Gristle down on the ground. Twig stood up and looked at the slaughterer boy. Everyone fell silent. Then, without saying a word, Gristle touched his forehead, stepped sullenly forwards, and touched Twig on his forehead. His face broke into a smile. "We are brothers now." Brothers, Twig thought. If only. "Thank you, Gristle, but—" "Whoa! Whoa!" he cried, as he himself was hoisted up onto the men's shoulders. Swaying precautiously from side to side, Twig smiled, then grinned, and then laughed with delight as the men carried him once, twice, 3, and 4 times round the table, faster and faster. He looked down dizzily at the red blur of happy faces beaming back at him, and knew that he had never felt as welcome as he did now, here in the bubble of warmth and friendliness that was the slaughterer's Deepwoods home. It would be nice, he thought, if I could stay here. At that moment, the air resounded with the sound of the gong clanging for a second time. The 3 slaughterers stopped running abruptly, and Twig felt the earth once again beneath his feet. "Lunch is over," Sinew explained as the slaughterers all jumped up from their benches, and, still laughing and singing, returned to work. "Would you like to look around?" she asked. Twig stifled a yawn and smiled sheepishly. "I'm not used to being up at this time," he said. "But it's the middle of the night," said Gristle. "You can't be sleepy." Twig smiled. "I was up all day," he said. Sinew turned to her brother. "If Twig wants to go to bed—" No, said Twig firmly. "I'd like to look around." They took him first to the Hammelhorn pens. Twig stood on the bottom rail and looked at the shaggy beasts with their curling horns and sad eyes. They were chewing drowsily. Twig leaned over and patted one of the animals on the neck. Irritated, the Hammelhorn knocked his hand away with a toss of its horned head. Twig drew back nervously. "They may look docile," said Sinew, "but Hammelhorns are unpredictable animals by nature. You can't turn your back on them for a minute. Those horns can hurt. And they're clumsy," Gristle added. "That's why we all have to wear thick boots." "We've a saying," said Sinew. "The smile of the Hammelhorn is like the wind. You never know when it's going to change." "But they do taste good," said Gristle. At the smokehouse, Twig saw row upon row of tilder carcasses hanging on hooks. A large kiln filled with red oak chips produced a deep crimson smoke, which gave the tilder ham its distinctive flavor. It was the smoke, rather than blood, which had stained the slaughterer's skin. Not a single part of the tilder was wasted. The bones were dried and used like wood. The fat was used for cooking, for oil lamps, and candles, and for greasing the cogs of the tarp rollers. The coarse fur was spun into rope, and the antlers were carved into all kinds of objects, from cutlery to cupboard handles. It was the leather, however, which was the most valuable part of the animal. "This is where the hide is rilked," said Gristle. Twig watched the red-faced men and women pummeling the hides with large round stones. "I've heard this sound before," he said. "When the wind is from the northwest, it softens the leather," Sinew explained. "It makes it easier to mold." "And these," said Gristle, moving on, "are the tanning vats. We use only the finest leadwood bark," he added proudly. Twig sniffed at the steaming vats. It was the smell he'd noticed when he was floating above the village. "That's why our leather's so popular," said Sinew. "The best in the deep woods," said Gristle. "Even the sky pirates use it." Twig spun around. "You deal with sky pirates?" he said. "Our best customer," said Gristle. "They don't come often, but when they do visit, they take whatever we've got." Twig nodded, but his mind was elsewhere. Once again he saw himself standing on the prow of a pirate ship, with the moon above, the wind in his hair, sailing across the sky. "Will they be back soon?" he asked at last. "The sky pirates?" said Gristle, and shook his head. "It's not long since they were last here. They won't be back for a while now." Twig sighed. He suddenly felt immensely weary. Sinew noticed his eyelids growing heavy. She took him by the arm. "Come," she said. "You must rest. Ma Tatum will know where you're to sleep."